Hello, and welcome to episode number 67 of the Lines podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by Brett, Collson, and FairwayJay. We're going to talk all the big news, all the big bets, all of the things going on in the sports betting industry. Guys, we are on Apple, we are on Google, we are on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, so please go in, subscribe, rate, review. Really appreciate the 5-star reviews. Helps us climb up the charts there so more people get exposed to the podcast here. You can find us on the Twitter machine at TheLines US, at PlayPicks US. Guys, we are coming off of week 2 here that was fairly interesting in the NFL. There were some, I think, maybe some corrections made. There were a lot of people who were saying, me included, that, you know what, maybe this Bengals team isn't going to suck after all. And then there were a lot of people saying, like, well, certainly this Browns team is much, much better than we saw in week 1. And despite the fact that they went ahead and covered a ton, I think that we saw there are still a ton of question marks surrounding this Browns team. So, Brett, before we get into all the big news here, what was one of the big takeaways for you from week 2?
Well, my Buffalo Bills are better than I thought. I honestly did not think they would go back to Jersey and win on the road again. We talked about it on the Circa podcast on Friday. I was pretty heavy on the Giants, and they got their doors blown off by Buffalo. This Bills defense could carry them to 9 wins and possibly a playoff berth, because on the other side of the ball, Josh Allen continues to learn. He's getting more comfortable each game. He's making smarter decisions with the ball in his hands. And last year he was trying to make something out of nothing, which resulted in turnovers and sacks. And now he's throwing the ball away, making good reads at the line of scrimmage. He's being a quarterback, and they have enough veterans, I think, on this offense. Not a lot of talent, but guys like John Brown and Cole Beasley who can help move the chains, from their experience. And this might be a good football team. I'm going to have to adjust this week.
Yeah, as we head into week number 3 here, Jay, what was something that really kind of stood out for you that you were taking a look at and said, all right, yeah, I'm going to definitely put this in my little holster here moving forward and take for real when it comes to some of these NFL teams?
Well, again, I do a lot of box score analysis, and the Cowboy, I'm a little upset I didn't actually lay it. I have a habit of not I don't want to lay road points, and the Cowboy, I did not play the home underdog Redskins last week, but the Cowboys were extremely impressive again. Very balanced, over 200 yards rushing, 474 total yards. And so I had some emails that come in, and a guy asked me about the division there and the Eagles. He has a bet on the Eagles to win the division and how I could maybe get out of some of that, how impressive the Cowboys were. And I basically said I agreed that the Cowboys are really impressive and they're going to probably be there battling the Eagles. And it is a 2-team race in that division, but pretty impressed with them. And then I missed a mark on the Bengals as well. I thought they'd come back home and play really well, but you have to be impressed with what San Francisco did going on there, not only winning, but racking up 570 plus yards at over 8 yards a play. And now they're 2-0. And so they're a team that's probably, you want to stay a little undervalued, but they're laying a pretty big price this week against Pittsburgh, so we'll see how the corrections are adjusting. And I don't think there's any doubt we're also seeing history in the making. This Dolphins team is all-time, right now, from a betting standpoint, they're going to be an all-time worst in terms of the numbers they're going to see now and moving forward.
Somebody asked me, Brett, and maybe I missed something and you guys have something that you feel is a little bit better. And by the time people are listening to this, maybe we have a different opinion of the Jaguars or not. They play on Thursday Night Football, and so if you're not catching this until Friday, that game will already be behind us here. But someone asked me, are there any of the 0-2 teams that I feel are really undervalued here and that we think that maybe are going to present some value going forward? And I looked at these 0-2 teams, Brett, and man, it's real tough. Someone's going to have to convince me that any of these 0-2 teams are just exponentially better than they have shown so far. I look at pretty much all of these teams. I mean, you maybe could make a case, and again, we'll certainly know a little bit more in the next 24 hours about this Jaguars team, whether Gardner Minshew can actually do anything under center for this team. But as far as the 0-2 teams go, man, they all look like varying levels of bad to me.
The only one that pops to me is the Steelers, even without Big Ben. They start off at New England, and then the tough game last week where they lose Big Ben. They have to throw Mason Rudolph into action. I'm a believer in Rudolph. I think he's going to be fine. So I guess that's the only one I could see still having a shot at the playoffs in a weak AFC. But other than that, yeah, there's not a whole lot here. I the one disappointing one is the Panthers, but I mean, I don't know. I guess they're just bad.
Yeah, I mean, again, hopefully we'll find something out tonight, and we'll report back on whether we kind of missed the boat there. Jay, what about these 2-0 teams here? Are there any of them that seem fraudulent? For the listeners out there, as we sit right now, the 2-0 teams are the Patriots, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, Cowboys, Packers, and we have 3 in the NFC West in the Rams, 49ers, and Seahawks. Are there any of these 2-0 teams that you think are a fraudulent 2-0?
I think Seattle is probably they're the most likely to not hold up in that division, I'd say, long term at 2-0. And I want to see a little bit more. I think they're a little bit vulnerable even against the Saints this week with backup quarterbacks going. So Seattle, it showed in their week 1, their statistical profile was pretty poor actually against the Bengals, and they escaped with a win. So I'd say they're the most of that group. But before the season, I definitely did not think the Baltimore Ravens were going to be the strength or win that division. So right now they're sitting on top, and with the Steelers quarterback situation and the Bengals probably not being as strong, that's looking good. But I still think the Browns will give them everything by the season's end.
Yeah, I think the only one I can kind of point at for me is this 49ers team. Yep. It's really the only 2-0 team for me that I kind of look at here, and I say, look, they've been playing really good defense, and then you kind of look at who they've played so far, and I mean, listen, maybe down the road, if this offense for the Bucs can kind of come together, we'll say, they lucky they caught them early in the season. Of course, the Bucs defense is much better. Jay, you talk about, looking at box scores and stuff. If you just look at box scores for that season opener against the Bucs, it could be a little misleading there. There were defensive touchdowns all over the place there for the 49ers against that Bucs team. And then the Bengals, again, I think we overvalued them, Brett. So, I mean, for me, I think the 2-0 team that I'm kind of looking at to come back down to earth here is this 49ers team.
Yeah, and I think it could come crashing down this week. Little teaser there.
I was going to say a little bit of a teaser out there for that. In the sports betting news this week, we got confirmation. We talked about it here on this podcast a few weeks ago, but we did get confirmation from Johnny Avello. He is the sportsbook director for DraftKings Sportsbook. Long time bookmaker here in Las Vegas that the DraftKings guys were able to poach away, and he has confirmed that they will have the version 2 of the Sports Betting National Championship. It's going to be the first week of December 6th to 8th. The only thing we really don't know is the location, but I imagine that it will be back in Jersey City again. They want to keep it as close to New York as possible so they can get all of those people coming over. A real easy trip to play in this thing. But one of the really, really good, and Brett, I wrote an article actually about this, and I joked with Johnny. I said, you must have read my article whenever he said this, but the very first thing that I said was it needed to be earlier in the season. It needed to be on a full slate of NFL games, and certainly needed to have some college games available as well. And that is exactly what they've done by moving it up to that first week of December. You're going to get the college championship games. You're going to get a full slate of NFL games. Of course, we will have NBA going as well. So I think that appeals also just to the more of the layperson, right? I mean, what we saw last year in the competition was a lot of these guys jumped up the leaderboard betting like golf, like European golf and stuff, and like weird stuff like to go on, because there weren't very many football games to bet on. And I think that might have kept some of the people who might have played this kind of out whenever they look at it and thought that they were definitely at a big disadvantage. But now we look at it and there's going to be a full slate of NFL games. You have the college games as well. You'll have the NBA going. I think this is something that can only help this contest like exponentially. I think it was the number one best thing they could have done for this thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you weren't the only one to provide that feedback. I mean, it was like a no-brainer, right? I mean, it got wild in there. We were there in January, and it definitely got wild in there, especially on Sunday as things started, as pressure started building. But there's going to be so much more action this time around with a full weekend of college and NFL games. Only 2 games on Sunday last year, which, I mean, that's where a lot of the problems that they had, that's where that was created from with the payouts. And look, a lot can be learned from last year, both on the operator side and on the participant side. I mean, DraftKings made it clear last year that grading winners could be an issue if a game goes long. And with only 2 NFL games on that Sunday, that's why those issues were so, I mean, they were right in our face. So maybe, spread your action out a little more, reduce the variance a little bit if you're afraid of that happening again. And I think version 1 was a huge learning experience really for everybody, and that's going to be better this time around.
Jay, as we look at this, I imagine maybe it's because I'm in the bubble here. What is your opinion? Do you think that them just moving the dates, do you think that is actually a big draw for this contest, or am I just living kind of like in the bubble here and not really seeing the full picture? Do you think that the casual better, and when I say casual, I don't mean like the guy who's betting $20 a game, but maybe the guy who's playing, $1,000 a week, $1,500 a week, something like that. Do you think now this contest becomes much more appealing to that type of player?
I think so. I think the schedule, definitely moving that up and having that selection of football games is going to be a big draw. And that part in the calendar in early December will be a real plus. So I know they've got to streamline a few things, I'm guessing, just to make the process easier for signups. And those are all tweaks that are, I think, not only easier to make but expected. But I would think that the numbers and the more exposure of the contest is going to draw more entries and more people. So the definite plus is the move up in the schedule in my mind, and having more football games especially.
And Brett, I can only imagine here what we'll see is the early and afternoon games for the NFL, and that will be the end of the contest. So it won't include Sunday night football. And with that, I mean, there's a definitive end to the contest. There's a definitive exactly how a typical NFL Sunday works, so there can't be any confusion about games overlapping. We understand that happens regularly, so you have to take that into consideration with your strategy. Yeah. You have to. So I mean, this isn't really anything that people don't experience on a typical NFL Sunday, and so you can't use this excuse of, oh well, my 10 a.m. game, or well, I say 10 a.m. out on the West Coast, but whatever, my 1 p.m. game didn't get graded in time for my 4:05. And listen, this is a typical NFL Sunday. If you bet the NFL on Sunday, you know exactly how this works. So I think this eliminates a ton of the kind of question marks as well. So just I think a much smoother experience is what we're in for.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone remembers what happened last year. So I don't see that happening again. The question is, does the cloud over version 1 keep people away this time around? I think a lot of people who did play last year were kind of turned off by that experience, even though it really was the setup there was awesome. I thought they did a really good job. The format is so fascinating too. It draws in poker players and DFS game theory guys. So, I mean, it really is a great format, but how many people don't come back that would have because of what happened last year?
Yeah, and we will certainly find that out because we'll be back out there again this year covering that thing. I will be in it. I'll be firing again this year, Brett. If you want to get your 5K ready and chop it with me, we can get in together. I'll be back out there firing at this thing yet again. I mean, I don't even need it to be $1 million up top, to be honest with you. I mean, turning, I will not go in 10K myself, so I'll find somebody to chop it with me. So turning 5K into 500K is perfectly fine with me. So I don't think they even have to guarantee $1 million up top for this thing to be, a good success. But we shall see. I mean, I imagine if they feel they can get the pretty close to the same amount of people they got last year, that they will go ahead and guarantee that big thing up top. So very, very interesting and very fun deal here. Live bankroll contest. So whatever you turn your 5K bankroll into, you get to keep that on top of what you win in the prize pool. Brett, let's talk a little bit about this interesting story coming out where we were looking through some official documents over there in New Jersey, and something really, really stood out of something that they had to consider here for making an exception for a bet.
Yeah, our colleague Dustin Gauker got the jump on this story after he was tipped off by a friendly Twitter follower who sends him interesting nuggets, I guess, from the New Jersey Gaming Commission. FanDuel filed a petition requesting a waiver on the $5 million cap for bets in New Jersey, which means somebody wanted to place a bet of more than $5 million on the Houston Astros to win the World Series this year, which is, I mean, that's kind of an attention grabber. Like, that's something that we were like, all right, what's going on here? And it looks like it is the same guy who placed a 7-figure bet on the Astros to win the World Series 2 years ago, hedging against a promotion at his furniture store. This guy's name is Jim Mattress Mackingvale. He is a furniture retailer in Houston, and apparently this is a thing that he does. He offers these insane promos at his store where, the Houston Astros winning the World Series, and here we are again. They are the favorites to win the World Series, and this looks like it's just a hedge against his promo at his store, which is just an insane story.
Jay, we got in the wrong business, man. This guy's selling mattresses and trying to make $5 million bets. Like, we got in the wrong business. I should have been in a mattress. I always drive by these friggin' standalone mattress stores, and I always say to myself, how in the hell are these standalone mattress stores just like, how do they stay in business? You keep a mattress for like a decade, but apparently maybe the markup is just absolutely absurd. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I guess we should have sold mattresses, Jay.
He stuck a lot of money under those mattresses along the way, it appears. But that's a good scoop and a good story. It's interesting to hear that it's coming from FanDuel that someone wants to extend the limit and put a little bit more out there. So that's pretty cool.
All right, let's head into NFL Week 3 here. And Jay, I want to start with you. And we had to deal with this a little bit last week, and now we have two different situations with it this week. I told you guys that I needed a full 3 touchdowns before I would even consider the Miami Dolphins. Brett's donkey ass made us put it on our Circa card at 18.5. Of course, we got destroyed on that bet there. Here we have 2 different 22-point plus spreads heading into, as we sit here on Thursday. Jay, does your opinion change on any of these, or are you still is this just like, let's sit back and, I'm not even going to say enjoy the games, because you're not going to enjoy these games either. It's just a completely 100% stay away situation.
Yeah, last week I did not come in and ultimately bet on the Dolphins last week. I talked it. I thought I'd play it, but I just, now that I see even more, they are going to be very difficult. It's a unique situation with what's going on in there and trading away the best players here at the start of the season, and not tanking, but they're going to play, but they're just outmanned terribly. So that one, I'm actually a little surprised that line's not higher. The Dallas being favored is not higher than the Patriots line. So I do have an interest this week in the Jets, regardless of a third quarterback now playing. I think Luke Falk's going to be fine, and he could be a find for the team. He was with Gase last year at Miami, and now we'll take over here. This line was on the look ahead was 14.5. I think open 17.5, maybe 19 in some places, has been steamed up, and that's quite a reaction to what's going on here the first few weeks. But I think the Jets, they're going to get the ball a lot in the hands here of the running back Le'Veon Bell, and I think maybe they try to slow it down. I think the under's probably a better play than that. But as far as these lines go, they're really there's stuff out there now that this is the first time in many, many years since maybe the strike season in the 80s, but certainly before that, the late 70s, where there's been 2 games lined 20 points or higher in the same week, and it's very rare. But my reaction is maybe a little overreaction, especially to the Patriots line.
Brett, as we sit right now, it is Patriots minus 22 at William Hill in New Jersey. They are 22.5 at DraftKings over in New Jersey. When we look across the market here in Las Vegas, 22s and 22.5s. There is 123 out there as well. Do you have are you going back to the well with one of these plays this week? The other one that Jay talked about is the Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys. That is 21.5, 22 across Vegas. There is 123 out there at Caesars. So Dallas minus 23 on that one. 21.5 over at DraftKings in New Jersey. And we're looking at, let's see here, 22 over at 22 over at William Hill in New Jersey. Do any of these blow your skirt up?
No, I mean, I learned my lesson last week with the Dolphins, so I'm staying away. The one thing I didn't factor enough into my capping with Miami was negative game script Ryan Fitzpatrick turning the ball over and not even giving the Dolphins a chance to cover, and especially against a disciplined defense like the Patriots, who are, I mean, there's no team that's going to be more prepared for Ryan Fitzpatrick than New England. So I mean, the defensive turnovers or the defensive touchdowns, you can't cap though. You can't price those into your capping, but they're more possible with a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I mean, that's definitely something to consider. The teams can score multiple ways against Miami, and the other game, it has to be a stay away. I haven't seen enough out of the Jets yet. And this Cowboys team looks really good. We talked about it last week. They were the most impressive team in week 1. Started slow in week 2, but really poured it on. I mean, they're throwing the football around. Dak looks like an MVP candidate, which is insane to me. But they're doing it, and they look for real. So I'm not surprised by either of these lines. And like Jay said, I'm a little shocked that line isn't higher.
Jay, I talked to a few different bookmakers here in Las Vegas this week, Johnny Vello actually being one of them. I talked to a couple of other guys around town, and their biggest challenge right now is they said they don't know if they can price this Dolphins team high enough to get any action on these. He said, listen, we thought we would get, once you get up to like 22, 23, they thought they would even get some just donkeys throwing it in a teaser where it's like, okay, it's up over 4 touchdowns. Can it possibly be over 4 touchdowns? And they're not seeing even any action on that part. Now, we are sitting here Thursday. There's still a few days for that type of stuff to roll in here, but they're literally wondering if they can throw a number big enough on this Dolphins team to draw any sort of significant action.
Well, they're definitely juicing it up here, and it may not be enough, but there's no doubt it's juiced. And I actually talked to Nick Bogdanovich this week, and he's the head of trading at William Hill. And, it was insane, he had said, the amount of bets and the amount of money really coming in. But the bets that were coming in on the one-sidedness last week with New England at Miami, even laying that price on the road, and they easily get there. So those bettors are going to come back, that are cashing in on the Patriots. They're going to keep rolling it and bet them again. So you just have to know that the line makers got to set the line high enough to try to get some action on the opponent. And this week it's the Jets, and I think they've met their match this week, and that's the great equalizer. Miami is the point spread, but Miami certainly, again, I think terribly outmanned, and the Jets maybe a reaction to not a good spot coming off Monday night, but they didn't look good. They didn't play well, but they're better than they showed. And, not a quality team by any stretch. And that's why we're seeing the numbers where it's at. But I think it's a lot of reaction to what people are doing with the Patriots and the domination and the fact they got money on them and they're going to keep riding it.
NFL Week 3 is going to look very, very different here as you kind of go down the card here and you see some of these spreads, guys. You're probably wondering what in the hell is going on here. But when you really take a look at everything that's going on, you fully start to understand. I mean, Drew Brees obviously out. In comes Teddy Bridgewater. Ben Roethlisberger out. In comes Mason Rudolph. Eli Manning benched. In comes Daniel Jones. Of course, we talked about with the Jets, Darnold and Simeon. Here comes Luke Falk. Cam Newton looks like he is not going to play. That game actually got pulled off the board last night, then reposted with the Cardinals as a favorite in that game. Kyle Allen under center for the Panthers. The top 2 wide receiving options for the Eagles, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, both out. Now you're talking about Mac Hollins and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside to go along with can't catch a ball Nelson Aguilar, and that's who the Eagles are going to have to deal with. One of the last talented players in Miami got traded away. Minkah Fitzpatrick is now on the Steelers. You have Xavier Woods for Dallas, who is, we talk about how much we love this Dallas team. Xavier Woods is injured on the last series of the game against the Redskins. And in comes a guy, Darian Thompson, who's been mainly just a special teams player there for Dallas. And the knocks came with Dallas yet again. Michael Gallup out 2 to 4 weeks with a meniscus injury. So they're going to have to turn to Devin Smith on the outside for them. You've seen Dak Prescott and Michael Gallup with a really, really good connection here early in the season. And then listen, even the overwhelming Super Bowl favorites in the Patriots are not immune to everything that's going on. Their starting left tackle, Isaiah Wynn, placed on IR for them. So, Brett, we look at this just laundry list of high impact either injuries or trades or people that are not going to be out there for these teams this week. And I mean, the NFL this week in the NFL especially could be really wonky, could be pretty wild.
Well, first of all, I don't know how the Patriots do it, man. They just churn undrafted linemen into Pro Bowlers. So I'm not that worried about Isaiah Wynn. They didn't have him last year either. The Andrews injury early in the year was a bigger one to me. Their center, but they look just fine. Yeah, a lot of interesting spots this week, and some of these are spots that I circle every year. The market overreaction to starting quarterbacks is almost always inflated. So I look at these as great opportunities to pounce on lines that are possibly a point or two off because the public is just fading these backup quarterbacks when, in reality, I mean, how many points are some of these quarterbacks worth? I mean, Ben Roethlisberger over Mason Rudolph, how many points is Ben Roethlisberger worth given how horrible he's looked, especially early in the season, even going back to late last season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my biggest thing here, and Jay, I'm interested in your thoughts here and see if you agree. My biggest, I think the biggest thing here for me is I completely actually agree with a couple of the moves here. I mean, listen, the Giants and the Bucks, I mean, going from that line really didn't even move all that much. And I think that the people look and say, Daniel Jones to Eli Manning, Daniel Jones, I don't think that's a big deal here. I think the biggest overreaction for me is this Panthers and Cardinals line, because what we saw from Cam Newton here early in this season is the most inaccurate passer in all of the NFL through 2 weeks. Also, Cam Newton has not been Cam Newton because of that injured foot. Ron Rivera stood on that podium and said, no, it had nothing to do with his foot. And then now it looks like the guy's not going to play because of that foot, when we were sitting there questioning these play calls. And he's like, oh, no, he's fine. It has nothing to do with the foot. And of course it was the foot. We all knew it was the foot. And then also to go along with what looks like a shoulder that has not completely healed either from last season. I don't know if going to Kyle Allen is really that big of a drop-off for this Panthers team here to absolutely flip this on its head. Cardinals now 2.5-point favorites over this Panthers team.
Who would have thought that weeks ago? But there's no question that Cam Newton was not right and not healthy. And you can just look at it, forget the passing and the inaccuracy, because he's had that issue through his career. He's not been a real accurate passer, but he has not run the ball at all. And I'm talking about attempts. He's hurting and his foot's bothering him, so he wasn't taking off and running and given that dimension to the Panthers. I think one of the things it's interesting is to see how does the team react when they lose a key guy and a big player. The Saints, I think, is a huge loss from what we saw, and really what I expect. Teddy Bridgewater is not the answer there, but they might even go, with their other option at quarterback and mix and match a couple of them this week. But the Newton one is, how are the Panthers going to take that? I mean, he's been their leader, and now they're going to a really unknown, Kyle Allen, who I guess beat out Kyler Murray at Texas A&M. Is that right? When he was playing quarterback there initially, but I don't know. The thought of all of these changes at quarterbacks this early in the season, to me, is a concern for the league. They're losing some of their star players and the teams, but also when you're betting, you don't have to bet all these games. You don't have to play these games where there's a lot of injuries and there's question marks, and that's why in-game betting, I think, is so interesting, because you can kind of see what's happening and developing and how the players are maybe adjusting in their new roles as backups taking the starter's role and make those decisions. But if you didn't notice, one comment I'll make from last week that is impacting the betting market is the totals, and that is just 3 of 16 games went over the total last week. Scoring was down to 38.6 points per game, and we've seen holding penalties, which is a big part of what's happening. They're really enforcing the holding penalties. It's up significantly through 2 weeks from a year ago, and maybe that's something more to focus your attention on, and who's going to have the ability to get the ground yards when they need it, and who's going to have the ability to make the shorter passes and keep the change moving, because we're seeing a lot more penalties that obviously impacted scoring quite a bit in week 2.
such an important thing to watch going forward. That more than just about anything is how officiating rules have changed and how that impacts totals. That's huge.
So, Brett, you mentioned about Mason Rudolph. Let's touch on a couple of these other spots here. Thoughts on Daniel Jones, thoughts on Teddy Bridgewater, these two guys taking over for their teams?
Well, first, Kyle Allen. I like Kyle Allen. I thought he looked pretty good late last year. I remember scooping up this same spot last year with the Panthers after Cam looked terrible then with his shoulder injury, and the market overreacted back then too. So I like the spot a lot for the Panthers this week. And if there is one game I'm looking to fade this, it's going to be the Saints. I think what Drew Brees brings to that offense, even though they have not, I mean, they don't throw the ball downfield. It's all short passes, intermediate passes with the Saints. So I don't see it a whole lot changing there. But the way he calls plays at the line of scrimmage and reads defenses cannot be underestimated. And I don't see that out of Teddy Bridgewater. So I think there's a pretty significant drop off there. And I think the market may actually be short on that one. So
definitely.
I kind of like Seattle on that one.
Definitely a spot where I like Seattle as well. You guys might have already seen this, but if not, here's a pop quiz for you. Last starting quarterback for the Saints not named Drew Brees to win a game for them.
Bobby Hebert.
Could be.
November 27th, 2005, Aaron Brooks.
Wow.
Aaron Brooks, November 27, 2005. So if that, you're talking about, Brett, what Drew Brees has meant to this offense and the continuity and the familiarity with everything that's going on. Yeah, it has been since 2005. And a guy that you probably forgot even played in the NFL is the last guy to win a game for the Saints under center, not named Drew Brees here. I think that this is a smash spot for the Seahawks. I think Teddy Bridgewater, if you guys remember, even before the injury, and it was a catastrophic injury for sure, but even before the injury, when he was with the Vikings, he had turned into more of a game manager. It wasn't like he was a guy that was out there making plays or anything. I mean, he was just a guy that kind of like you could stick under center and you knew wouldn't really cost you a game, but certainly wasn't going to go win you a game. And he looks like a worse version of that now for this Saints team here. And yeah, I think this is a pretty good smash spot for the Seahawks there for sure. Jay, before we move on to one of your articles that you posted over at the Lines and Play Picks, when we're talking about trends here, are there any other spots that you're kind of all over here? I mean, we've seen some pretty big movement on the Bills. I mean, this was that game opened at 4.5, moved to 6 after people saw just how terrible the Bengals looked. I mean, of course, we know that there is a pretty big hole at playmaker and wide receiver there for the Eagles, and the Detroit Lions are actually catching 6.5 on the road with this Eagles team. I mean, that seems a little bit interesting to me. We've seen the line on the move for the Vikings at home against the Raiders, which we all predicted the Raiders coming back down to earth. And we've seen that line kind of take off from 7.5 all the way up to, you can see it as high as 9 now in some places out there. So some pretty interesting line moves in some of these spots here for these teams.
Well, I'll comment about what to kind of watch for and look in as these lines are released and you're making bets, especially if you're doing some early week betting or want to get involved with teasers. And the reason is a line like the Vikings, there's still 8.5s out there, and there's certainly some 9s hitting the board. But part of that movement and adjustment is not only the money coming into the Vikings, but the bookmakers are going to protect themselves as well against some of these teaser plays that they expect to see. And Minnesota certainly at 7.5, 8, and now even 8.5 is I think going to be a popular teaser play back down under 3. When it was 7.5, you can get them under 2.
Already destroyed that one, my friend. That one is the anchor of a bunch of my plays this week.
Sure.
This Raiders team, I mean, look, I predicted them coming back down to earth. That certainly did come back down to earth. And plus, just this is the beginning of that schedule from hell that we talked about before the season started for the Oakland Raiders here. And I think with what the Vikings defense brings to the table here, if they can't win that game by a field goal, if Kirk Cousins can't find a way to win this game by a field goal, then they have some serious problems up there in Minnesota.
Yeah, and so again, those are things to look for, and same with the Packers. I know, I played both of those. I teased both of those down, and those are things to look for when you're evaluating the lines, and then looking not only at the look ahead, but where you anticipate some of these going. And I don't think there's going to be enough. You're going to hear all about the quarterbacks and all the changes there, but what you discussed early in this program is a lot of the injuries that start to happen and on the defensive side, and what's happening with the Eagles has to be addressed and understood. And I think the sharp side maybe looking at Detroit on some of that play this week as well. But there's certainly much more adjustment we're going to see in the marketplace. And your comment on the Seattle game with Teddy Bridgewater as well, I play the under on that, and I think that's going to come down a little bit more. I do think there's going to be some struggles for the Saints. They're going to probably go to the ground a lot more, and yet if they don't have that element of the passing game, Seattle will stack the box. And I think you're going to see some scoring struggles, and the Saints defense certainly is capable of keeping that within range as well.
Brett, real quick before we move on, we do have legal sports betting over in New Jersey. We're going to have a lot of people who are listening to this that are Giants fans. Daniel Jones, Eli Manning, push at best. It's certainly not a downgrade, right?
I don't know. I haven't seen enough out of Daniel Jones. I didn't watch a single of his college games. I can't say I sit down and watch Duke football every week. So I really don't know what this kid is. We saw him torch some of these preseason defenses, but what does that mean? So I really have no idea. This is a complete stay away for me until I actually see it. I will say, though, it's going to be interesting to see how the team responds to him versus Eli. That locker room it's been so stale for years, right? They're just not doing anything. It's just been the same year after year. And now they got this rookie quarterback in who could be the future. So we'll see. This line is the one that I'm going to pay the most attention to as we head into the weekend over in Jersey. And it's strictly for learning purposes here, because I do want to see if, as we get closer to kickoff, if this thing starts to trickle down, because the fan base over there for the Giants is just so pumped up that they actually are having, someone else under center here. They get Danny Dimes under center, and it's going to be so much better than Eli and all that. Jay, I'm actually curious to see how this line moves and see if the regional bias comes into play in this one, because, listen, we've seen it before. We saw it a bunch last year. We haven't seen a ton of it so far this year, only through 2 weeks, but wouldn't surprise me if Giants money starts coming in strictly on the casual bettor, feeling pretty good about their new quarterback.
The Giants this week, I know there's some regional bias, but they're going to be I think a popular play out there as well. And right now they're sitting at 6.5, and I know nearly 60% of the market on a number of offshore locations that track this are supporting the Giants. So if you like them, I don't think you're going to see a 7, and may certainly close at 6. But the one interesting note about that game is that there's a large support, pushing 80% of the tickets are coming on the under in that game. So maybe that's the impact that they're seeing with the quarterback, not expecting Daniel Jones to do too well in his opener, but that's where that game's lining up. And got some trends things we can talk about as well as, and one of them I commented on in the article was about this Giants team and their history against the Buccaneers.
Absolutely. Perfect segue into this. As you guys know, we're going to let Jay talk about some trends here. I'll give you my personal opinion. I think trends are complete garbage. I hate them. I think it's the worst thing ever to use in your handicapping, but that is just one man's opinion. There are a lot of people who have found ways to use them, and I think maybe use them properly. Brett, I think you go to them on occasion. I would like to light them all on fire and shoot them with a bow and arrow into the sun, essentially.
Yeah, look, I think there are situational trends that carry weight over a big sample. So, things like weather trends and totals. Certain teams or coaches coming off buys. Trends that involve the way the market moves off a win or a loss. That's the stuff I'm looking at. Maybe you can forecast the way a line is going to move based on a team's most recent win or loss and how the public is going to react. But, these numbers, I guess you could say these numbers open your eyes to things that you could look at from week to week, but then you have to get granular with each game.
What you said, it makes the most. It's like market trends I'm okay with. Market trends I'm okay with. What I'm not okay with is there were lazy ass touts out there who were literally talking about the reason that the spot was bad for the Bills last week was because it was back-to-back road games to start the season. And not even, and literally they probably had not even looked at the schedule long enough to understand that it was 2 road games inside the state of New York, and that it was the same stadium that was literally a 20-minute flight from where they are. They were familiar with the stadium. They were familiar with the locker room.
They stayed in the same hotel.
They stayed in the same friggin' hotel. And there were people who were talking about how this was a bad spot because it was back-to-back road games for the Bills. And I'm like, are you people insane? Like you're just spitting out this stupid trend because it was something that you think makes you sound smart. And it just, that type of stuff drives me completely insane. But yes, market trends I can get with, but but just stupid arbitrary stuff like that where you're not even looking to see that the damn team is playing in the same stadium in back-to-back weeks right down the road is just crazy to me.
Yeah, you can't just blind bet a trend because it's hit 7 of the last 8 times over the past 4 years. Like, there's always context involved. So, we're starting a series over at the Lines. Jay's going to be writing for us 5 trends that you can just throw away. 5 of probably hundreds of trends each week that you can throw away. Kind of just driving this point home that trends, for the most part, mean nothing.
And Jay, with that, I'll turn this over to you so I don't have to scream into the microphone anymore.
I'm on your side on all this, and if you go and read the article. We decided to do this because I think there is so much spew out there and so much stuff, and it's not to separate what's the good and bad. It's just, I think, to help bettors understand that there is so much of this out there. Most of it, a vast majority of it, is meaningless, and I point that out in the column that trends don't win games or pay the rent, and most of them, they're useless, and you commented on that. There are a lot of fluff added to the game analysis to try to convince. There's marketers that use these, and we talked a little bit about the touts that use these to kind of sway you or maybe show you why they got a certain system that they've backfitted to fit these perfect situations to get you to buy in on plays. But the reality is most of them don't work, and you can go there. There'll be 5. One of them for the Thursday night game, so check that out. But we'll go off of that, and I'll just point out one of these that I found interesting is Dallas and Miami. They don't play much, and they're in the separate conferences. But there's a trend out there that says the total has gone under in 5 of the last 6 meetings between the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. And you'll see a lot of those types of total trends or just situations covering a small sample of games to kind of show you their current form, but that is really meaningless. I mean, these 2 teams have played twice in the past decade, so what does that matter at all? That we're talking going back further. Actually, the trend that's using that goes back as far as 1999. I pointed out that Dan Marino was playing this final season for the Dolphins, so it really doesn't matter. And so if you're looking at, let's play the under based on some of those things, that's just ridiculous. But more important is to get into the matchups, and you're going to see obviously Dallas taking the majority of the bets, but that's one. And the other one, maybe since we were talking about the Giants, is that the Giants are on a 7-1 against the spread streak going when they play at Tampa Bay in their last 8 meetings in Tampa. Well, that one as well, 6 of those 8 games in that trend were more than a decade ago. So they're just completely meaningless, but you'll see some of that fired out, and that trend actually goes back as far as 1991 was the 8th time going back that they played. So they're really meaningless. You want to get into the matchups, and certainly this one, I talked that this is getting bet down more on the total. People are expecting maybe less scoring. The other thing about a trend like that is, and especially a team trend, is when you see, you've got a coaching change in Tampa Bay. You've got a complete new system. You've got a quarterback in his 5th year with Winston who's learning a little bit new system. He's got a new offensive coordinator that's calling plays, not just Arians. And in this situation, I pointed out that Winston has also thrown a league-high 61 interceptions since he came into the league, drafted number 1 overall in 2015. And all of that, you just want to get into the matchups. But a trend like the Giants is 7-1 in their last 8 times going at Tampa Bay, that's meaningless. It just doesn't matter in today's market at all.
Brett, where can they find this article? Is this a Play Picks or a Lines article?
This will be at the Lines every single week. We'll probably run it Wednesday or Thursday, so definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll have it. It'll be on the site in time for the Thursday night football game. I know Jay's got one trend to ignore for that one, so it'll be a fun one to write every week because we're pretty passionate about it.
We are. That you can guarantee that's going to get a retweet from me every single week. I mean, that is good. with a like a smiley face emoji like every single week whenever that happens. So
it's such a good example of this industry being in its infancy in the U.S. So you go on social media and some of these tout sites and even TV shows, and they're feeding people this garbage that means nothing.
Well, because it's low-hanging fruit, because that stuff is easy to find, because a computer will just spit that out for you, and it's not. You don't have to do actual research. You don't have to actually break down games. You don't have to go in and actually see what's going on. It's like the lowest of low-hanging fruit, and for whatever reason, well, actually not for whatever reason, because if you're not kind of in the know, if you're just Joe Public who's watching, something like that goes, oh, wow, that is really good information. And that's why we're here. Thank God. If you're listening to this podcast, congratulations for making it here. If you make it to the lines to read Jay's article every week, congratulations, because this is all going to be a big time learning experience for all of these new bettors to come in and realize what is actually real and actionable and what is absolute noise. And this is mostly noise.
Yeah, you can cherry pick a trend to fit any narrative you want. Every single game, and people are doing that because they're lazy and they don't want to do any work. And so, we're going to try to help you guys out with that.
Love it. Love it. Jay, good luck this week. Brett, good luck this week. Guys, we are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. So please go in and subscribe, rate, and review. Give us the 5 stars. Tell everybody that this is something they should be listening to. Help us climb the charts here, and we can make this thing bigger and better every single year when we go on with this thing. At TheLines US, at PlayPicks US. So you can find me at Matt Brown M2, Jay at FairwayJay, and you can find Brett at Brett Collson. Guys, good luck this week. If the Vikings don't happen to cover a field goal in all these teasers that I have tied to them, I might have to fly to Minnesota and burn that $1 billion stadium down, because that will ensure that I get buried this week. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, it will be a bloodbath for one Matt Brown. For Jay, for Brett, I'm Matt. See you guys next week.